Hey guys, this is Read Aloud Part 2 of Lunch Money, and for our learning goal today, I can draw inferences from a text by analyzing the character's thoughts, actions, and dialogue. So we're going to continue from yesterday's lesson, and we're going to create a list in our journal. So what I need you to do is get your reading journal out and get ready to create our anchor chart that we're going to make. So as we read the story, we will try and make inferences based on the character's thoughts, words, and actions. So at the very top, you can put Greg's thoughts, words, and dialogue. I'm sorry, not actions, is dialogue. And on the other side, you're going to put inferences and what this tells me. So I just draw a straight line down, make titles for the top, and have little boxes for when we track what the character is saying and doing. Okay, so go ahead and turn your Journeys books to page 486. Now remember, when I do shared reading, I may blank out a few words and would like for you to say them. That way it makes it easier for you to follow along as I read the story. Okay, so you should have a pencil, your journal out, and taking notes as I read the story. And I'll help you with your notes as well every now and then, but you need to have your journal, your book, and a pencil. Okay. Page 486. The idea of making and selling comic books had hit Greg like a crank over the head from Superman himself. It made perfect. Candy and gum were against school rules, and tiny toys were boring, and also against the rules. But how could he go wrong selling little books? School was all about books and reading. True, reading a comic book wasn't exactly the same as reading a regular book, but still, there was a rack of right in the kids section at the public downtown, and some new graphic novels. Comic books had been part of Greg's life forever, mostly because of his dad's. His dad's collection filled 3 shelves in the family room, and it was worth over $10,000. Once Greg had shown he knew how to take care of the comic books, he had been allowed to read and look at them all he wanted. Greg even bought a few collectible of his own, mostly newer ones that weren't very expensive. Okay, so I'm going to go back in my journal and take the notes on what I just read. And something that Greg said to himself was that candy, gum, and toys are against school rules. So I'm going to put that on the left side of Greg's thoughts, words, and dialogue, and I'm going to make an inference based on this. The inference that I made was that he knew books were popular at school and allowed. So I'm going to jot that in my notes. Go ahead and you do the same exact thing. Okay, remember, try and catch those thoughts, dialogues, and actions on your own if you want, but I'll also be taking you through it if you can't catch it on your own. Page 487. It was his love of comic books that had first gotten Greg interested in. Comics had led Greg to books like How to Draw Comic Book Villains, You Can Draw Superheroes, Make Your Own Comic Book Art, and Draw the Monsters We Love to. Back in third grade, Greg had used his own money to buy India ink, dip pens, brushes, and paper at the art supply, and drawing new comic book characters was one of his favorite things to do when he wasn't earning money. Okay, so based on this paragraph, what could I write down as far as his thoughts, words, and dialogues? Well, I know that Greg bought drawing books because it says it right in the text that he was led to books like Draw Comic Book Villains, You Can Draw Superheroes. So now let me go back to my journal and I'm going to write this. Okay, so I'm going to write bought drawing books on one side, and I'm going to make my inference. Well, my inference that I made is that he's an artist and that he wanted to learn how to draw. So that's why he bought all those purchasing books. So you can see how I found evidence from the text on the left side of my chart, and I'm making my own conclusions or inferences on the right side. Okay. That whole summer, before 6th grade, Greg had worked toward the launch of Chunky. From the start, he had felt pretty sure he could come up with a story idea, and he knew he would be able to do but first, he'd had to deal with a lot of hows. How does a whole comic book get put together? How big should each be? How was he going to print them? How much would it cost to make each one? And finally, how much money should he for his finished comic books, assuming he could actually make some. But one by one, Greg had found the answers. An encyclopedia article about printing books had helped a lot. It showed how pages of a book start as one large sheet of paper that gets folded in several times. Each time the sheet is folded, the number of pages is. So Greg took a piece of regular letter-sized paper and folded it in 3 times the way it showed in the. That one piece of paper turned into a chunky little 16-page book. Chunky Comics. It was so simple. Okay, so going back to my chart on the Greg's thoughts, words, and dialogue, he asked tons of questions about making comic books. So I want you to actually put and think about the inference next to that. If he's asking lots of questions about comic books, what does this tell me as far as him as a person or what he's trying to achieve? So put down what that inference is in that box right there next to it. So go ahead and pause the video and write down an inference that goes with Greg asking questions about making comic books. Okay, go ahead and turn to page 488 and 489. But not really. Greg figured out that making little comic books was a 10-step process. 1. Write a story that can be told on 12 to 14 mini comic book. 2. Sketch, draw, ink, and then letter all 16 mini pages, which include the front and back. 3. Paste 8 of the mini page drawings into their correct positions on a piece of paper to make master copy 1, a sheet that can be copied again and. 4. Paste up the other 8 mini pages to make master copy 5. Using a copier, print the images from master copy onto side of a press sheet, a piece of regular letter sized. 6. Print master copy 2 onto the flip side of the press sheet, making 8-page images on the front and 8 on the. 7. Carefully fold the press sheet with the 16 copied mini pages on it. 8. Put in 2 along the crease at the very center of the little book, between pages 8 and 9. 9. Trim the 3 unstapled, and that makes one finished mini comic book. 10. Repeat. And each of the 10 steps had to be done perfectly, or no one would ever want to spend money on his little comic books. So on this page, what does the author do on these pages 488 and 489? What does the author do to help the reader understand how to make comic books? And how does this help you as a reader as well? Does it help you out for what the author is actually doing? I want you to reflect on that with your learning coach. Okay, so let's go over our learning goal. I can draw inferences from a text by analyzing the character's thoughts, actions, and dialogue. So you guys helped me create a chart, and it looked something like this. And I asked you for the last portion of the box to make an inference on Greg asking lots of questions about making comic books. So We're going to continue adding on to this list tomorrow's lesson. Nothing needs to be turned in, but check your learning goal and see if you are able to make inferences from the text. That concludes part 2 of our Read Aloud of Lunch Money, and we will finish this story tomorrow.